who turned out all the lights. My name is Regina. I'm 25, and I'm back in Petoskey, Michigan, with my parents. I flew back to Petoskey about 3 years ago due to a supposed mental incident I had. I had left so that I could pursue college at Fordham University in NYC, something which my parents didn't approve of. They would have preferred if I went to the University of Michigan, considering I would have been much closer to them if something were to happen. And I should have taken their advice. I am going to post what I recall on the night I arrived in New York to see if anyone else had a similar experience. This is because what happened 3 years ago is something that won't make me visit New York City or any other big city. Once I saw that I was accepted into Fordham, I ran downstairs to my parents who were in the kitchen. I informed both of my parents about the news, and they tried to act just as excited as I was. Mom, Dad, I got accepted into Fordham University. They were trying to look as excited as I was, however, something seems to be bothering them. Hun, my dad said, are you sure about this? I mean, New York is so far away, and not to mention that Fordham is in the Bronx. I'll be fine, I whined, plus Aunt Lucy, Uncle Tony, and their family live in Brooklyn. I could always go to them in case something happens. We are aware. My mom said, we just want you to be safe. Just make sure to not explore at night. And if you do go out, go with your roommate Emily. She'll be excited to finally meet you. I understood why they were worried, but as I told them, family would be nearby. A week has passed, and my family and I are helping me pack as I had a long flight ahead of me. We were in the family room, and I grabbed my empty backpack while speaking with my mom. The only thing I am not looking forward to is my 5-hour flight. Seriously, you'd think it would be 3 hours considering how close Michigan and New York are. My dad is carrying my suitcase down the stairs from my room, joining in the conversation. Well, it's not like the Petoskey Regional Airport is huge. This is the only direct flight to NYC that they had. You should be landing in the JFK airport about 10 p.m. As he said this, he rolled my suitcase into the garage. I think we are leaving now, so I'm gonna grab everything else that I am planning to take with me. My backpack is ready to go, so I'll join my parents in their BMW. I placed my backpack in the back of the car and begin climbing in the back seat. Only 32 minutes left to deal with us, and off your way to the Big Apple, huh? My dad mumbled while turning on the car. Yup, I can see the amount of texts and calls now. The Bronx Zoo opens tomorrow at 10 a.m., so maybe if I'm not sleepy, I'll get breakfast and visit it, I told my dad, reassuring him that this will be a positive experience for me. I zoned out while listening to the sports station my dad had on. I wonder what I'll do first when I land in New York. I do want to go to the Bronx Zoo, but then again, I might want to sleep in tomorrow morning. We are getting close to the airport and finally reached the American Airlines terminal. My mom and I gave each other our final hugs, and I gave a final wave to my dad when heading inside. The flight from Petoskey to New York City was exhausting. Delayed twice, cramped seating made the already long journey feel endless. The overhead lights began to flicker sporadically, adding to the discomfort. Eventually, the plane finally landed at 11 p.m. The city feels distant, even though it's right outside. We are now parked at the gate, and my tired eyes are struggling to adjust to the chaos of people getting up from their seats as the seatbelt sign turned off. They want to get off the plane as much as I did. Luckily, my suitcase is carry-on size, as my parents and I figured I would thrift clothes during the first couple weeks of being in the city. Now that I'm out of that plane, I began following the directions to get an Uber. 10 minutes have passed, and I'm now in the garage where a couple of other people were waiting for their drivers. I have the Uber app pulled up, and after waiting a couple minutes, I now have a driver. David, 14 minutes away. I sigh, speaking to myself, all right then. Hopefully I don't fall asleep standing once he arrives. 20 minutes later, David arrives. Regina, David said, helping me lift my suitcase into the back. Yes, that's me. All right, I saw you were heading to the Opera House Hotel, which will take us about half an hour. Maybe you could get a quick nap in. Seeing the state of his car, I didn't feel comfortable with it, but considering that I want to be decently rested tomorrow, I suppose he's right. Haha, yeah, I suppose so. Hopefully you don't fall asleep on the wheel. I said, climbing into the back of his car. Speaking of, he wasn't in a marked car, just an old sedan with a dingy interior. In the car, the smell of stale cigarette smoke lingered, with some garbage scattered across one side of the back seat's floor. Brooklyn's bright streetlights should have felt like relief, but the streets appeared empty. The car kept rattling over every pothole, making this drive seem endless. I'm questioning if this was the right ride, but I shouldn't be worried considering David knows my name. I just hope we get to the hotel safely with the car in one piece. Taking David's advice, and with my seat buckled, I closed my eyes without hesitation, slowly drifting to sleep. Something isn't right. Despite me opening my eyes, I only see darkness. I'm still sitting in the car, at least I think I am. But why can't I see? Not only can't I see, I don't think I can hear either, as it's completely quiet. Trying to dig my hand into the pocket of my jeans, I got a hold of my phone and turn on the flashlight. I'm definitely still in the sedan, but it's just me, and I think it's parked in the middle of a tunnel. Where the hell is David? I'm getting tense and worried, so I grabbed the handle of the car door and surprisingly, the door's unlocked. I climbed out of the car and saw that none of the lights in the tunnel are on. Using the flashlight from my phone, I see that ahead of the sedan were other cars, completely abandoned in the vast tunnel. Given that the sedan was unlocked, I grabbed my suitcase and backpack. Assuming that all the cars facing forward lead to Manhattan, I began walking that direction. The only sounds accompanying me were my feet and the rolling wheels of my suitcase. I had my phone's light at the lowest setting in order to retain its battery, only to see what's ahead of me. For what almost seemed like an eternity, I finally managed to get out of the tunnel. I wish I would have stayed in David's car until morning. I was hoping I would come across someone to help explain what's going on. And yet, all the lights, people, and sound of New York were gone. In front of me was the husk of a city. Looking ahead, it seems that I have to walk further, as the highway continues outside of the tunnel. "What's that?" I whispered. In the far distance of the road, I can see what I believe to be headlights of a car, which are moving at a fast pace. Regardless, my excitement of seeing someone overwhelmed me, and I immediately called out to them. "Please, stop. I'm lost and I have no idea where everyone else I dash." Next thing I know, the lights passed through my body, and I couldn't comprehend how fast they passed by. Along with their speed was the blaring sound of a car horn and a huge amount of wind, almost tumbling me over. Those lights weren't attached to a car, they weren't attached to anything. I told myself, trying to reassure that what's happening isn't real, considering how sleep-deprived I am. Regaining my composure, I continued my hike towards the city. Finally, I reached where streets merged and buildings were at a safe, walking distance. I figured if I traveled this far, I might as well try to find a hotel, or just somewhere in a building to rest, charge my phone, wait until morning, and then call my parents to inform them about everything. Granted, for all I know, the city could be in a dire situation, and maybe everyone living here had to evacuate, but then how would I have gotten here in the first place? Too many questions are bothering me, and I need rest. To preserve my energy, I chose to walk into a bodega that had kept its doors open and started to look around. Much like every other building, there was no one inside, and all the lights were off. I found a drink and a bag of chips and started to leave. I yelped. Turns out their security system still works, as a siren goes off for roughly 3 minutes. For some reason, I'm staying with the sound of the alarm, as it's the only sound that I know is real. It was almost comforting. I've been walking for an hour now, and checked the percentage of my phone. 17%. I had to find a hotel, obviously to use as a place to sleep, but as well as a place to charge my phone. Once my phone's battery was at 30%, I would call my parents. I don't care at how upset they will be for waking them up. Using the light of my flashlight, I finally see what I believe is a hotel. Ha! Something is catching my eye. There's a bright red light, which is emitting from an open door. The door is in an alleyway right across the street. Thinking I might find somebody, I let go of my suitcase and raced over to the door with my backpack on. As I got closer to the door, a humming sound starts to become audible. I'm standing in the dark, right next to the glowing red door. Now that I'm closer, the quiet humming noise is much louder now. I took a deep breath in, grabbed the handle of the door, and fully swung it open. Immediately, I peered into the bright, red void that's inside the door and cannot pull away my gaze. The once quiet hum is now a loud, blaring noise that is piercing my eardrums. Along with the sound, the bright red light is growing more saturated. My eyes are being forced wide open, and I was fearful of what I was experiencing. I'm trying to look or pull away, but some force is controlling my entire body, keeping it locked in place. It's so painful, it feels like my skin is burning alive due to the exposure of the red light. I must have blacked out, as my body couldn't handle the overwhelming pain and intensity it was experiencing. My body is slumped over on the rough, concrete ground. I start feeling pressure pushing against my left shoulder. "Ma'am, I need you to wake up for me." I hear a faint voice, and as I slowly open my eyes, an excruciating pain arose from my abdomen and legs. I'm trying to lift myself up, and immediately stopped as I felt sharp pain shoot throughout my entire body. A couple minutes have passed, and soon I am able to open my eyes. I try to look at who is in front of me. There is a police officer, paramedics, my aunt and uncle, and someone who I believe is my roommate. Fully awake now, I realize I'm in the same alleyway. However, I could barely hear, and it's daytime. Unable to hear my own voice, I shout out, "What's going on? How did you get here?" To "There's people." "Ma'am, I need you to calm down." The cop has both of his hands on my shoulders now. As the paramedics come towards me, I look down to realize that my clothes are torn, both of my legs are broken, and I have major bruises on my stomach and ribs. The paramedics pick me up and bring me into the ambulance. The police officer and my aunt and uncle join me, with my roommate Emily heading back to our dorm. The police officer dials my dad's phone number, put the volume on speaker, and began to explain. "Hello, is this Mr. and Mrs. Moore?" "Yes, this is Mr. Moore speaking." Who is this?" "This is Nathan R. of the New York City Police Department. We have your daughter in the ambulance, joined by your brother and sister-in-law. You see we dash." "Fuck, what happened? Can I speak with her?" My dad yelled. "Sir, please. She won't be able to speak well as her hearing is almost completely gone, and she has multiple fractures in her body, but rest assured we have this call on speaker volume, so she can somewhat hear you." "Shit. Honey?" My dad walks away from the phone, speaking to my mom. "Come here. They found Regina, and try to get us tickets to New York immediately." He hurries back to his phone. "Please, sir, explain what happened." "Well, last night we received a call about a woman. This woman being Regina, attempting and successfully fleeing her Uber on I-495 with her suitcase and backpack. She was seen by other drivers frantically running towards Manhattan, and in a horrific accident got hit by oncoming traffic, which is how she broke her ribs and legs. Somehow, unfazed or otherwise, she desperately kept running, no matter how much it pained her. During this assumed episode, she managed to travel 2 miles west and stole a Red Bull and bag of Fritos from a bodega near where we found her. A guard said she attempted to break into a locked business building, and in confusion tried breaking into the business building from the alleyway. She might have given up or gotten too tired, and that's when we found her. A couple days have passed since my incident. Laying in my hospital bed, I hear a knock on the door, with my nurse and parents coming in. Along with them is a psychiatrist, whom my parents brought in hopes of figuring out what's going on with me mentally. After some evaluation, she diagnosed me with intense agoraphobia, or a fear of being in places that are too big, large crowds, or being unable to escape, and best recommended that I shouldn't go to college in New York. My parents agreed, as they wouldn't want these episodes to occur again and conflict with my education. Once I was healthy enough for travel, my parents and I flew back to Michigan. I was charged $400 for petty theft, which my parents paid for, and the person who had hit me helped in paying for the multiple surgeries I had. My roommate Emily felt bad for me, but was stoked that she technically has a single dorm, considering I wouldn't be there anymore. Whatever this is, I know it's not agoraphobia. Ever since then, the lights, sound, and people around me will disappear anytime I thought about that red light, and because of that, it hasn't left my mind. Go with the light. I took a drag off my cigarette as I watched the man lumbering in the distance. He had an unsteady gait that would have made me nervous if he was alive. His neck was bent at an unnatural angle, his right arm torn off at the elbow joint. It was not easy to distinguish any other features as he was still too far away. I lit another cigarette as I watched him. Must be difficult to be dead and not know it. The sounds of the night filled my ears. The crickets chirping and the breeze gently blowing the leaves. Closer and closer he lumbered. As he got closer, I began to make out more features. He looked young, maybe in his late teens, early 20s. What little was left of his left eye appeared to be brown, though it was rather hard to distinguish given all the blood covering his face. His head was caved in, as if he had been thrown through the windshield of a car. I suppose that could explain his missing limb? He was so close now I could hear his ragged breathing. It sounded wet and very inconsistent. Interesting how the dead continue to breath even when it isn't necessary. His mouth opened, and I awaited the typical, "help me" utterance that most dead people gave. He surprised me by letting out a scream that echoed inside my head. A few moments passed before the scream tapered off. His eye, fixated on me, and he stopped walking. I stared back at him, waiting for him to speak. "Help me," he whispered. The blood in his throat made it almost inaudible, but I had become accustomed to speaking dead speak. There is the typical "help me" utterance. I looked at him, motioning for him to go on. "Where am I?" I sighed as he asked his question. "You're dead. I assume that car accident up the road ended life for you." He stared at me with his one good eye and let out another wail. My patience was wearing thin with this one. "What do you want me to do? Who do you want me to tell? ECT. There has got to be something you need." His scream cut off and again he stared at me. "Tell my dad I am sorry. There it is. About time." I took my pendant from around my neck and walked towards him. I placed it against what was left of his head and whispered, "Agath Nei Lithe," which roughly translated to "go with the light." His body began to shake and slowly fade away. It will be his choice now whether he reincarnates or just takes a sabbatical from the grind of life. After that death, I think I would want to take a sabbatical. I threw my cigarette butt out into the darkness and walked back inside my cozy little apartment. I needed to take a shower, but sending the dead over was an exhausting experience. It took so much of my energy to ensure that they got across to the other side, or whatever you want to call it. I plopped down on the couch and cut on my TV. Some mindless program is just what I needed. I dozed off at some point and was awoken by the cries of a child within my apartment. I let out an exasperated sigh. For some reason, dead people always picked the middle of the night to show up. At least they could have the kindness to come around after I had a full night's sleep. I tried to ignore the cry, but it resonated through the small apartment. Begrudgingly, I got up off the couch and searched the apartment. I found her in my bedroom closet, sitting in the corner. Her outfit was not a modern one. It looked to be late 1800s garb. "You're dead. I'm sorry, but you need to go now." I held my pendant to her head and sent her on her merry way. Children get lost a lot in the transition. They usually don't have any unfinished business, but just need a guiding hand to get across the gap. You may see me as uncaring, but this is my everyday life. It has gotten to the point where I can barely even hold down a job and a social life without being bombarded with dead people needing something. Sometimes it is the most trivial shit, too. They forgot to mail a letter or they left the oven on. The smallest thing can hang in the mind and make the transition complicated. So, how did I end up like this? Well, I died. More accurately, I died and then came back. They revived me after I was out for 20 minutes. I was only 8. Apparently, you really shouldn't go swimming after eating. I was in the local pool in my neighborhood after lunch and got a horrific cramp in my stomach. I doubled over in pain, slipping under the water. It was a wave pool, so it didn't take long for me to be knocked under the waves. I fought to get above the water, but the pool was so overpopulated, I couldn't stay above the surface. Next thing I remembered was waking up in the hospital. My mom crying and screaming for the doctor. Apparently, I was out for a week. My brain activity had dwindled down to nothing, and they were getting ready to pull the plug. Good timing. Huh? Dying twice in 1 week seems a little much. I digress. When I awoke, I noticed that there seemed to be way too many people in the room. I thought they were family members I hadn't met yet, but they looked a little off. Some were covered in blood, some were very pale. You get the point. As I got older, they began to speak to me. I listened and tried to help as much as I could, but I had no idea how to help them cross. When my grandmother was on her deathbed, she whispered to me, "Agath Nei Lithe." Her wrinkled hand slid into mine, imparting the pendant upon me. "Help them," she said, and then she was gone. Took me a few more years to piece it together, but eventually I did. Go me. Huh? I decided it was a good time to take a shower since the creepy little girl had disturbed my slumber. Why did they always have to be crying, speaking in their monotone little voices? But I got into the shower and turned up the hot water. I closed my eyes and let the water wash away the stench of death. Metaphorically speaking, that is. I got out of the shower feeling like a brand new person. I toweled off and slipped on my robe. Coffee sounded amazing, so I trekked into the kitchen and started a pot. The sinful aroma filled my nose, warming my soul. I grabbed my Dr. Who coffee cup and poured myself a hot cup of happiness. I felt eyes upon the back of my neck. I let out an exaggerated sigh. I just wanted to drink some coffee in peace. "I assume you need something?" I mumbled as I turned around. My coffee cup slid out of my hand, shattering on the floor. The dead person I was staring at was my mother.